it's something that you try to explain it to young people, and they can't grasp it because they don't have enough experience in life to understand what you're talking about. And you can't really expect them to understand everything you're saying because they just don't know. The tragedy is that at that age, until they're in their 20s, the myelinization, again, I've said this before, the myelinization of the frontal lobe isn't complete. The frontal lobe and prefrontal lobe that are responsible for final reasoning and also for you having control over gratification. And you don't have that full control as a teenager because the myelinization isn't there. And so you have sort of uninsulated electrical wires going on there with, all sorting out and all that. That's one of the things that people perhaps aren't aware of but don't realize. Television is, some of the stuff that's going on in television is taking place in the lives of people who don't have the full capability for regulating these things. And yet some young people still turn out to be quite decent, partly because of the experience of the relationship between the mother and father, and partly because they're just more alert, and I would say they have more wakefulness than others. Yeah. And so, that's one thing that we can have such gratitude for children who turn out honest, just honest and decent, and it happens, you have to actually admire teenagers and young people who go through all of this and still manifest the better qualities of humanity. And it happens, constantly. And yet there are so many people who are so negatively affected that they create chaos and violence in society. It doesn't take a lot of people to do that, but there are enough. And for every child who turns out to be decent and honest, there are probably 10 who turn out the opposite way. And there are so many things against them, though. And of course television is part of it. You can't really be wakeful while you're watching television, spiritually wakeful. And yet we're not going to get rid of it, and we're not going to get rid of the internet. And the internet can become such a vulgar, destructive thing. And after a while, nobody's going to take the internet seriously, what it says. It's just because it's too vulgar, it's too full of lies, it's too full of deceptions and slanders. It's not just that people slander each other, slander other people, but you also get these ideas that, like saying that Obama was the Antichrist, for example. It's a little extreme, even if you're a Republican. In the first place, he's not Jewish, so he can't be the Antichrist, not for the tribe of Dan. And he's not going to reign from the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. But or the slanders against him, and some of the slanders against other politicians will take place. But even the slanders about governments, too. And think about it, governments are bad enough, we don't need to add anything. But, you've got the Bilderbergers and the Jews and the Freemasons and the Illuminati and the UFOs are coming from outer space and taking over human body. You get all this stuff, and before long, people either don't take anything seriously, or they take things too seriously, and then they get abnormal fears. Yeah. So that's part of it. Yeah. Spiritual wakefulness should guard us from those things.
It's difficult with those, I know. We have to be selective in what we watch.
Yeah. Well, when people start worrying, there's going to be one world government. You see this all the time on the internet.
Oh.
And it's going to come and it's going, okay, so what? Say your prayers. Mm-hmm. Because if the prophecy is going to say there's going to be one world government, then there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. The thing is, what are you going to do about your own spiritual life in relationship to it? Okay, let there be one world government. Antichrist is going to reign. It certainly is. So what? Say your prayers. Prepare, just say your prayers and hold fast to Jesus Christ. But worrying and fretting about it and saying, how can we stop it? You can't stop and prevent something that's been prophesied in Scripture. It's going to happen. But just as surely, Christ is going to return and we're going to see paradise. So spiritual wakefulness should focus us on saying our prayers and learning how to have unselfish love. And everything else will unfold the way it's supposed to unfold. But that's part of spiritual wakefulness, too. Yes. Anybody else have a question?
I read recently, like Michael Newton, like travel of your soul. And I'm heard question, what do you think about like reincarnation and so life after death and the ability people to restore their before birth memories and so all this stuff.
Well,
what do you think about?
You know, reincarnation would be kind of strange because then when the soul and body are going to be reunited with each other in the resurrection, how many bodies can your soul be reunited in the resurrection? You know, I have to tell, I guess, a little bit of a joke about it. Somebody may have heard, you know, about the Jewish boy who came home and told his mother he'd become Buddhist and he believed in reincarnation. And she said, Buddhist, yeah, reincarnation. What good would reincarnation be? Even in another life, you wouldn't write, you wouldn't call, you wouldn't ask how I am. But reincarnation is rather ludicrous in a way. I mean, the idea of reincarnation. I had a lady friend in Alaska, an old Alaskan woman, kind of fiery soul, but she said, well, you know, for a little while I believed in reincarnation, but then after I'd met 20 or 30 Cleopatras, I realized that there was something wrong with it. Nobody was ever a slave or a peasant or a homicidal maniac in a previous life. They were all kings, queens, princes, intellectuals, or something like that, you know. If somebody came back and said, yeah, I was a swineherd in a former life, you know, that would be a little more believable. But, I mean, how many Cleopatras can there be? How many Mark Anthonys can there be if you have all this? It's a little odd, but there's other. Actually, we should have just a discussion of that alone sometime, because these phenomena are interesting, actually interesting in themselves. So, yeah. Anybody else have a?
Actually, I have a question. Just wondering, what do you think about? Because some people are happy, some not, right?
Yeah.
So, is it lack of certain chemical in the brain, or there's something wrong with the soul of the person who is unhappy?
Well,
in your opinion, what's that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be both. That's the whole thing, because but usually people who have a chemical problem are not simply unhappy; they're depressed. It comes to some kind of depression.
Yeah.
And that we know because serotonin is either not enough released or serotonin uptake is too fast. People who are too happy are probably smoking something. But dopamine release too has something to do with the brain as far as brain chemistry goes. But it really is a matter of a feeling of well-being. And usually it's a matter of depression. You know, the chemical balances are rather delicate. If you have not enough dopamine, then you get Parkinson's disease. If you have too much dopamine, you're likely going to be schizophrenic because, you know, your brain's flooded with this sort of thing. Yeah. And the balances are off sometimes. But in general, I think the people who are actually, an actual kind of happiness, are people who are content with life and content with where they are in life.
And content with life?
Well, it doesn't mean that you're, frozen, that you're not going to try to do something more or that you're not going to try to progress. It just means that you're content with life itself. That life is beautiful. There's plenty around you. You have acquaintances who put up with you and things like that. But generally, there's some kind of contentment that goes with an actual happiness. Because without contentment, there can't be a happiness. There can be some kind of a giddy sort of thing. And you'll see this, and I don't mean really to be too critical of some Protestant ideas in a way, except that when you look at what passes for worship in Protestant churches, you realize that the whole episode, as they call a worship service, is really a kind of self-hypnosis toward feeling better about yourself. The service is not about God, it's about you. It's about me. We're not worshiping God, we're trying to feel better about ourselves. So you're trying to reinforce some kind of a giddy, something that passes for joy, when actually all it is just a hyper excitement.